guys, so I'm here today to do a currently reading video where I talk to you about the 3 books I'm currently reading and my thoughts on them so far at the point I'm in each one. So without further ado, let's get into the books. So the book I'm listening to on audiobook is Asata, the autobiography of Assata Shakur by, of course, Assata Shakur. I do actually own a physical copy of this. I can get it out to hold up, but I am listening to the audiobook. I just was not getting around to reading this because it's quite a chunky autobiography and I had some Audible credits, so I decided to go for audiobook because I always quite enjoy listening to biographies and autobiographies and even just generally non-fiction on audiobook. I think it's a nice way in and I enjoy listening to it when I'm travelling or walking places. So I am listening to this on audiobook and I'm about 3 hours in. I think it's 11 hours long and I'm about 3 hours in. So yeah, I've listened to a chunk of it now. I've got a sense of what it's about. So Assata Shakur was essentially wrongly imprisoned and had to flee prison and escape to Cuba. She was on like the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, all essentially because of her race and the fact that she was a civil rights activist. She was in a car one night and she was pulled over by the police and a policeman died in the struggle, but all of the evidence proved that she could not have killed this policeman, and one of the people she was also travelling with died, and it all just, you know, spiraled out of control and she was treated incredibly cruelly by the system basically because she was black. And this is her story from her own point of view. So you get what's happening to her from this incident where she's pulled over and her experience of the legal system and being in prison. She was held in a male prison for a long time, the only female person to ever be a prisoner in that male prison. She was treated abominably. It is such an disgusting story, to be honest. You feel so angry and I'm not surprised, just given having read and watched other things, but hearing it all again from somebody's perspective of their experience of the incarceration system and the racial injustice, and it's just horrendous and is such a heart-wrenching story. At the same time, however, she keeps reflecting back on her childhood and growing up, and from a really young age. Just now she's a teenager in the flashbacks, so you're learning about her as a person, how she became the person she is, her upbringing, her experience with racism, her experience with internalized racism, with the system, with living in segregated America, and it's just heart-wrenching. It's so heart-wrenching and it's so important. I would really recommend reading this. It has a foreword by Angela Y. Davis, who I'm sure many of you have heard of. I'm a big fan of Angela Davis's writing. She is a political activist in various different areas of politics and feminism and race and class, and she's just fantastic. And I actually first learned about this book and Assata Shakur from an Angela Davis book, so it was quite nice to come back around and have Angela Davis introducing this volume, and I am so compelled by it. I'm really enjoying the audiobook, although enjoy always seems like an odd word to use when it's such a dark story and so many horrible things are happening in it, but it conjures up such strong emotions in you as a listener or a reader. It makes you feel so angry at the injustice in the world, and I think political books and political stories like these are so important, so I would highly recommend either picking up the book or listening to the audiobook. So far, and I'm only 3 hours in, but I will obviously let you know my final thoughts once I've finished it in a wrap up, but I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy it as much throughout, and it's probably just going to make me feel even more strongly by the end. Then on my Kindle I am actually reading a book that is the 3rd in a series, and that is Binti the Night Masquerade by Nnedi Okorafor. So the first book in the series is just called Binti, and I read Binti and the sequel Binti Home really close to one another, I think a month or a month and a half ago, one after the other basically, because I needed more. I loved the first 2 books in the series and I left it a few weeks before I decided to read the 3rd one, but I decided to start a couple of days ago and I am really enjoying it. So the second book in the series, obviously I don't want to give away the plot, but the second book in the series leaves on such a massive cliffhanger. So at the beginning of the 3rd book you're just flung straight into the action. It just picks back up from where the second book stopped, and it almost just feels like the same book. And that's the one thing I'll say about these novellas, is that they're very short. And if you buy them in physical copy, they're quite expensive, and they do just kind of feel like one book when you read them together. But that's just the publishing industry for you, isn't it? I mean, they're cheaper if you buy them on Kindle, and they're still so worth checking out. They are amazing science fiction novels. So the premise of this story is that our protagonist Binti is the first of her people who are one specific culture, an ethnic minority on Earth. And she is the first of them to ever leave Earth and go to attend UMSA University, which is a university on another planet, which takes students from across the galaxy, across the universe, I imagine, different alien races, and she is the first of her people to ever go there. And she's sort of balancing her own culture and her identity and her background and her family with her desires and her curiosity and her need to kind of do this thing that nobody's ever done before, and fitting in with new people. But even in the first book, the action is all there. These are full of action. So much happens in them. Right from the beginning of the first novel, you're just flung into the deep end, and it's quite an intense story, and they all continue to be pretty intense. So this one is equally intense. I'm about 25% of the way through on the Kindle, and yeah, I just think this series is fantastic. But they're very fast-paced, kind of action-packed, but at the same time they're thought-provoking and detailed and nuanced and so well written and imagined. You do have to kind of suspend your disbelief and accept things the way they are, but I don't find that very difficult. I find that Nnedi Okorafor has done a wonderful job creating a believable world that I can just fall into and just imagine is real, set in the future. And I really like these books, and they've made me want to read more Nnedi Okorafor. I think she's a fantastic writer. So I am really excited to get to the end of this book and finally see what happens at the end of Binti's story, see how it all wraps up. I'm hoping for some happy endings. I'm always hoping for happy endings, so fingers crossed it all works out kind of at the end, or at least in some way or another. I'm intrigued to see what will happen, though. I feel like all is up in the air. Your guess is as good as mine. I honestly could not predict what's going to happen, which is a good thing. And then lastly, I just started reading Child of the Prophecy by Juliette Marillier. I'm only 40 odd pages into this book, and I think it's over 600. No, not quite 600, it's like 570 pages long, so I've not made a massive dent in this one, but I know once I get into it I won't be able to put it down, because this is also the third in the series, the first one being Daughter Forest. It's the Seven Waters series, and with both the other books in this series I've sort of got to about page 100 and been addicted and not been able to put it down, not been able to read anything else. So I'm kind of thinking I'm going to try and finish Binti the Night Masquerade first, because it's a really short book. It's only 200 pages and I'm already 25% of the way through. And then really just dedicate my time to this when I'm reading physical books and not listening to audiobooks, because I'm just sure I'm going to love it. This series is a series, but each book follows different members of the Seven Waters family and are always set a few years in the future, so it doesn't continue on the story of the characters necessarily from the original story. However, there are overarching plots, there are threads that continue to weave throughout all of the character stories, and obviously there's characters that you know appearing in each book, and events from the previous book affect things that happen in the next books, but you're centred on a new protagonist. So in this book we are centred on Fane, who is a young sorceress, and I'll say no more because I don't want to give any spoilers for the original two books, but yeah, she's a young sorceress, which is slightly different from the other two protagonists that we'd followed, and it's about her journey, and she's quite different from the other two characters in the other two books I read, and I think that's a good thing. I think it means it's not going to be a stagnant series. I'm getting a new perspective, a new kind of character, and I'm excited to see how her journey compares to the characters from the original two books. This is actually a 6-part series, although I think maybe there was 3 that were originally released and then 3 kind of added later. So I think once I've read this book I'm going to take a break from the series. I know it's hard to say because maybe once I finish this I'll just need the next one, but I also think I need to read some other things, and I don't want to not have any books in this series to read. So I think I'm going to, once I finish this, give it a month or so, or a couple of months until I pick up number 4, just to spread out a little bit, because this is one of my new favourite series. The first 2 books were 5 stars for me, and you know, if this is anything like them, I'm sure it'll be 5 stars too. They're wonderful high fantasy novels set in medieval Ireland, full of magic and fairies, and they're just beautiful, and there's always a romance somewhere in there, but it's always a really well done romance and a nice romance to follow, so I'm excited to see what comes from this, although I think it's already pretty clear what the romance is going to be in this one from the beginning. So yeah, I would highly recommend this series, and I'm excited to get further into it. But those are the books I am currently reading. I would love to hear your thoughts on them, whether you've read them or are just interested in them after hearing me talk about them. I also love to hear when you have recommendations of books that you think I would like based on the books I've talked about in this video. But until next time guys, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!